It's like the cheapest efficiency tool I could possibly think of.
Either when you build something for a business or they build it themselves, they kind of have to understand how to build it.
When I use custom GPTs to assist me in the collection and processing of a lot of the information that's provided me in raw form.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is October 10th, 2024. You're listening to the Daily AI Show. And today, what's coming up is we're going to be talking about whether Perplexity is possibly the next ChatGPT custom GPT killer. What do we mean by that? We're going to dive into all of it. I've got Jyunmi and Andy with me. Today, I'm Brian. We also have Beth, but she's just sort of rebooting and coming back in. So I think we'll have Beth here in a second as well. And we'll see who else comes in the door. So like I said at the top, what we want to talk about today is what are the current capabilities of Perplexity's API? How does that factor in when you're trying to build automation solutions like you can do in a custom GPT? And we're going to break all this down. And can you now effectively replace the best parts of a custom GPT with using Perplexity in an automation system like Make or Zapier, or honestly, pick your tool. There's many you could do, Respell and so many others that can basically tag into that API for Perplexity. So let's just sort of start real quick here by backing up, I think, and just talking about what I feel like, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this too. What are the real benefits of a custom GPT? So in case you're not doing this stuff all the time. By the way, we have Karl here. He just joined us as well. Welcome, Karl. If you haven't really messed around with custom GPTs, they've been around for now over a year. So I don't want to just assume everybody has. More than likely, if you have a paid account with ChatGPT, you probably either used one or built one. I will give props to OpenAI. They made it very, very easy to stand up a custom GPT. And so examples of that is on this show, during live shows, and even when we're off shows talking about the production of the show, I've been able to quickly stand up a custom GPT to solve a problem in real time while we're talking about a problem. And that's not because I'm a whiz. That's because they're just dead simple to really get going. They're like a really simple RAG system. Now, if we rewind months and months and months ago, over a year ago, a lot of us were playing and excited about Respell. And by the way, I have nothing bad to say about Respell, but we were in that tool. And it had like a search functionality. I don't know how that's been updated over the months because I really haven't been in that tool. But it was sort of slow and it was lethargic. And then boom, here come these custom GPTs. And I personally realized that you could start solving quick solutions with custom GPTs. But where they really shined, and the point of today's show today, was live search. OpenAI, and since then, they've even gotten better at it. OpenAI has done a very, very good job of being able to get that live search results sort of seamlessly with the automation that you're essentially creating. So for example, I work in sales. So let's just take something easy like prospecting, because that and prepping for a discovery call are the two top consistent custom GPTs that I've built. I've built many. Help me book a meeting with, help me find a lookalike lead, help me prep for this upcoming discovery call. Those three are always at the top. So let's just use one of those as an example. For for prospecting, you need more than just probably whatever was built into the language model. It's probably okay, sure, if I want to look at Nike, there's probably plenty in there. But as we know with SaaS companies, they're coming and they're going and they're changing and they're moving. Make used to be called Integromat, right? These things matter. People are coming in and out of the businesses. Leadership is changing. What's going on in their industry and sub-industry is possibly changing in the last couple of months, especially with AI. So you need live information. It doesn't have to be to the second. It's not like a sports score. Like I don't need to know who won the game last night per se, but I do need fairly live information. And custom GPTs have made it very, very easy for months now to grab that live information while also pulling from basically their RAG system. So basically their documents that you could upload. And the third part of that three-legged stool is whatever was built into the language model. So language models we know are great at about writing communications, writing emails and all that. So if I want to get recent information along with my company's writing style and put out a good email, and I need all those three things to work really well together, in my experience, a custom GPT has been the easiest. That's not to say there's no issues, but it has been the easiest way to accomplish that. And it's the reason why we sort of put our eggs in that basket initially at Scaled, because we were able to provide solutions to our clients. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll highly customize that to the client to make them even more powerful. Okay, so let me pause there. What has your guys been experienced before we get into Perplexity's API and where it's starting to maybe take some of the power away? What has your guys' experience been with custom GPTs, whether using some of the really powerful ones like Grimoire or building them yourself?
For me, it's been mostly building them for myself. And I don't know if that's what everyone's experience is, but because they're so easy, like you said, Brian, because they're so easy, if I have an idea or I need some sort of task accomplished, and especially if I know I'm going to have to do it multiple times, a custom GPT is just the easiest way to dip your toe in there. It's like, hey, I need these sources and I need you to do this specific thing. And what I don't need is to re-educate or retrain you in the normal chat to do this one thing over and over again. So I think that's where the biggest benefit for me has been is, like, for example, when you came up with the summary tool, right? I deal with a transcript every day. I need to process that every day. I need to get a summary out of it. I need to get those hashtags out of it, all those kinds of things. And so I'll use the GPT to do that task because I'm doing it at least 5 days a week. So that's kind of where my touch point is and what the greatest benefit is. Now, there has been some great GPTs out there publicly, and Grimoire is a great example of that. It's very powerful. I've used a couple of others, one in development. So GPTs are usually created and released out into the wild for a niche use case, right? Mm-hmm. So Andy and I are working on this one project, and we initially looked at, and he found for me a GPT that worked with the particular combination of tech stack we were doing some development in. And that was a great resource to, get your first step in. Let's, try to develop with that focus of that tech stack. So it was able to get us deeper into solving our particular use case than, just starting from scratch with a regular chat window. Yeah, so that's kind of where I see the power of it. And again, you're right. It's not perfect, but
we'll talk about that. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, it's a great first step.
So before we get into like why it's not perfect and why you might want to start thinking about something like Perplexity, because there are some good reasons for that, there's also some bad reasons why you wouldn't want to do that. That's what we want this show to be about, is to help educate why you might step away and why you might stay. And there might be 5 reasons why you stay and 5 reasons why you step away, or use cases, I should say. It doesn't mean you just totally abandon one for the other. But before we do that, real quick, Karl, Andy, custom GPTs. I know, Karl, you kind of do more stuff with the API. Andy, I know we've certainly talked about it. Do you lean on custom GPTs for any sort of like live search, anything that would be beyond what's currently built, either A, in their RAG, because you put a document in there, or B, it was already trained into their data set?
I use it for 2 different things. Well, the RAG part, personal and for clients, a lot of the clients, we use it to build, if they don't, ideally we build it in their own platform. So we build it for them using their account, but we built a lot of co-pilots. So what we've done is interviewed a whole bunch of people in the company, used the transcripts, clean it up a bit, and then use that company profile, anything else as the kind of knowledge source, and then add supporting docs. And then that way, that whole thing becomes a co-pilot for the company. Don't think we could replicate that using Perplexity or Make or Zapier. It just wouldn't make any sense to do it that way. And then there's always very specific tools, right? It's like, oh, this company needs an RFP tool, a lot of proposal tools, right? It's like we submit a lot of proposals for whatever the reason. So they just need something that would either write the proposal or ask them a set of questions so then it can create the proposal. And here's an example, and then away that goes. And then if there's any issues in terms of search, if they need search capability, which custom GPTs already have, but if you need something even more robust, there's also the function feature that we can just code in whatever other functions they need, especially if they need to connect more to Google Docs or Teams or whatever else. That function is, we just build, you can just make a connector. So what's really interesting is the use of a GPT. If there's anything we can't do, we would just then go use the Assistance API, which is literally the same thing, but we can build it outside and then add any other components to it if people don't use ChatGPT or anything like that. So that's part of our digital assistance offerings. Like, okay, we can build it that way. We can, wrap pure custom digital assistant, third party, but that has been an option for a couple of clients too.
Yeah, and you mentioned the assistant. I want to get to Andy, but you mentioned assistant. That's part of the reason we'll talk about Perplexity's API, because something you just have not been able to do with the assistant. The reason you would use the custom GPT is because it's, well, in my opinion, blazingly fast when it comes to just pulling in recent research. You're not really going to run into an issue with it pulling in data from yesterday, from the internet. It's doing basically a Google search, but it's doing it pretty efficiently. But Andy, real quick, before we get into pluses and minuses and why we're talking about Perplexity as maybe a possible alternative, what has been your experience real quick with the custom GPTs? We'll start there.
Yeah. So I built a number of custom GPTs for various functions that I perform, in my own personal life, and also, for example, I'm working on a nonprofit tax return right at the moment, and I use custom GPTs to assist me in the collection and processing of a lot of the information that's provided me in raw form. That's a labor of love, nonprofit contribution to the world, and I've also, I would say, in general, I use custom GPTs that are pre-built by other people. I'll often go and search across the explored, custom GPTs space, and they've organized that very nicely. OpenAI has, and as Jyunmi said, we used one that kind of matched a very peculiar combination of tools that we want, but somebody had built that out there, and it was really well done and worked very well. One of the things that makes custom GPTs really fun and easy is the usability that OpenAI achieved in there, including the ability to build a custom GPT just conversationally with the builder agent in that process. And you can also customize it yourself using the other panel, and I've done it both ways. So ease of use and the inclusion of these various functions make custom GPTs probably the fastest way to get the functionality that you want, that's repeatable and shareable. And the only problem is that you really can't build that into your own application.
Right.
So having a web search API built in alongside an LLM, as is the case with Perplexity, which they've now released an API that kind of combines with its own multiple access to various models that you want, and you can build something that way and accomplish the automations with an external automation agent, I'll call it, like Zapier or Make. But I want to point out that you could always do that if you were smart enough. You could use Zapier and Make and call on the Bing web search API, and you could have built these applications that way, but nobody's ever promoted that particular combination. And by Perplexity packaging them together in one space and one API, that makes it easier to use. And usability is really a key to, adopting these things.
100%, because you have to, like, if you're going to, let's say, look for an alternative option and you've been doing custom GPTs, I'll put myself in that category. There's a lot of check boxes. It has to hit, right? Check marks has hit because it is so easy. So I'll just give you, like, I don't know if it's my top 5, but I'll give you my reasons why custom GPTs are great, right? We've already talked about some of these. They're blazing fast to set up. We could literally be talking about a use case right now and go, because we have an AI first mentality, which we always preach to people, always think, could I solve that with AI? Is there a solution? Oftentimes you might find that a custom GPT is going to be the fastest. Is it perfect? No, but for speed and getting really, really close, it's hard to beat. Cost. Oh, so that's speed, right? But also speed of results. Your latency for getting an answer is very, very low these days. In fact, the search has gotten better as well. So low latency, speed on both ends of it. Cost. You can build 100, 1 or 1,000 custom GPTs and use them as much as you like within reason. You're going to hit some data caps within your $20 to $25 price point for a pro plan or the paid plan of it. That alone, if you're heavy into that and you've got people in your company, let's say you've built 10 of them internally for your company, and everybody's using them for that company, if they're footing that $20 a month bill, $25 a month bill per employee, it's like the cheapest efficiency tool I could possibly think of if people are using it. You got 10 or 15 of them that are now picking up the slack or doing things faster, repetitive tasks faster for a company. Holy moly, you could easily get efficiency gains for a very, very, very low cost if you're a company. And of course, people pay for these independently as well. Those are big ones to me. Obviously, like I said, the ease of which you can combine 3 things at once. What the language model is built on, the trillions of parameters, a RAG system, and a pretty good one at that, actually. It does pretty good at recalling from documents, and also getting that live search, but getting them to play so as the end user, because I build for the end user, so that end user experience is very, very important to me. This is a plus and a minus, but the plus side of it is, from their perspective, they don't really see them happening independently. They just see the meshed answer. To the end user, it just simply works. Now, asterisks on that. It doesn't always work. So that's my pivot towards talking about Perplexity, or like you were saying, Andy, there's other solutions here, but since we're talking about Perplexity, one of the biggest issues going outside to an API, creating a make or Zapier, or as Karl does, more customized, or using the agent or the assistant, or going into Respell, and we can name 17 other tools. Calling APIs has been that it is, as Andy pointed out, not been super easy to get a quality is key here, search results. Now, we have watched Perplexity build. We have watched Perplexity get better at their craft. They are not trying to be necessarily a Google killer. They're coming at it from a slightly different perspective. And the quality of their results are actually pretty good. So now you have to start thinking, okay, well, why would I? If everybody just say custom GPTs are so awesome. They are, but here's where they sort of fall down. When they start getting complex, and I have built some very complex ones, not as complex as Grimoire and calling in agents and stuff, but I've certainly built some complex prompting, big prompting with chain of thought and many things going on. What you don't have is infinite control over how the custom GPT reacts, because at the end of the day, it's ChatGPT with a wrapper around it. And ChatGPT wants to give you the right answer. As Beth is always saying, it's a predictive engine. It's going to make you, it wants to make you happy. It's going to try its best. And even when you have exactly what you wanted to do, and you wanted to stay between this lane and go no further, you will oftentimes find, that if I deploy this to a company with 30 people of that company using the same custom GPT, we will oftentimes have 30 different experiences using the exact same custom GPT. Because of memory, I can't control what some people have built into their memory, and that affects it. And because of other reasons that are outside of my control. And so as somebody who's trying to perfect that end user experience, it can be insanely challenging, beat your head against the wall challenging to provide a repetitive, consistent, high quality user experience. Because sometimes ChatGPT wants to go off on its own and thinks it knows better than the person who created it. And that's problematic. You cannot adjust temperature. Temperature, by the way, is creativity. So that's already preset. And so if I can't affect temperature or creativity, I can't say, hey, at this part of this prompt for the user, I want you to be 0% creative, because the answer is in your RAG database. Go get the answer and retrieve it. Exactly. But the next step, I want you to go be super creative, because we're writing a communication, we're writing an email snippet or whatever. So I want you to be not creative here, and I want you to be creative over here. That gets very complex, and custom GPTs, at least in my experience, and I've built many, is not great. This is where I feel like the pivot point is for where you want to start looking at something like a Perplexity API. And I don't have as much experience as Andy or Jyunmi or Karl really in the API space. So you guys are more the experts here. But what I will say is it actually is easier to prompt when you're able to break something out. I'll show you just a really quick example of what that would look like for anybody who's like, well, what do you mean break that out? I am no make expert, but I will just show you very quickly, not a slide. I'll show you very quickly what that could look like in a very simple way. Okay, very simple. I'm taking an input from a Google Sheet on the left. I'm going to do some research on it in Perplexity. You can see that it's step 2 here. Step 3 is, hey, this Google Doc has information about my company. It's the way we like to do things. It's the RAG, right? And this could be several documents. It could split off 16 different ways and come back together. Then once I have the information about the company in step 2 from Perplexity, which has done all the research on the company, the people who work there, what the sub-industry is doing, what trends are, with all that stuff, right? And I combine that with what's going on in my company and what I need them to know about my value propositions and how they associate with their pain points in this example. Then we use custom GPT to take that information, those inputs, and do something with it, and we output it to a document. Very, very simple example here that certainly can get way more complicated. But this is where you start to have a little bit more finite control. This is where you can say, I only want you to do this or that. And in my experience, I found that the prompting gets way simpler because you're breaking it up into chewable pieces that have one specific goal. Do this thing. And then I'll tell you in the next step, here's what you lose on it. Speed. Your latency goes up. You're going to sit there for 30, 45 seconds to get the same comparable answer that you do with a custom GPT. But what you lose in latency, you get in reliability and repeatability of the quality of the answer for the end user. So now you've got, okay, what do I need? Speed and latency, right? Low latency, or do I need consistent quality? Now you're starting to think, okay, which direction do I want to go? And the answer probably is going to be build it in both and see which one works better, right? You repeat it, or in a make or something. Okay, I've talked enough.
I'll add to that flexibility. It adds flexibility because now if it turns out that a custom GPT is not exactly what you want, and there's a new model over here that does better at that step, I can just plug that into that make chain of action that you created. Right. So you can alter and enhance and improve a lot more readily than you can go in and you might have to recreate a custom GPT in order to add some functionality that you wanted to, because they're not that flexible. I wanted to make another point, by the way, which is, we're noting that real-time, up-to-the-minute web search, which Perplexity offers, which Google offers, which Bing offers, those things are essential to certain applications of AI. And what's odd is that Google doesn't provide a search API. You can't get raw search results from Google via API. They have a Google JSON API for creating a custom search on your website, but only against your website. And that's the API they offer. And strangely, even in Google AI Studio, and Karl, you'd have to correct me if I'm wrong about this, they don't have a web search function in the Google AI Studio. You can't use Google search within that Google AI Studio if you're building an application. That's what Perplexity told me. So that could be that there's a bias at Perplexity about what Google can and can't do. But anyway, Karl.
I'm not sure. In Google AI Studio, I know I was talking to a Google product manager like several months back, and I remember the conversation is, hey, if I wanted to build this, it's like, oh yeah, I just use this, and I can't remember what specifically he said to use to be able to connect that to Google. But I have seen people use, there's a couple function calls that they've been able to connect. They're like, oh, this was back when GPTs were first introduced. There's a couple function calls that they were using to connect it to use Google search rather than Bing search. So they were doing it that way. So that was the only thing I can think of. Well, in terms of Perplexity and using that as an alternative, I just find it depends on the use case. It really, really depends on like what specific thing said, what the individual use case is, what the company use case is, what the team use case is, because there's so many ways, right, to build certain things to make the certain outcome, whether it's using an automation tool, whether it's going to custom GPTs, whether it's building something custom. So it depends. It so depends. And it so depends on what the expectation is too, because if the expectation is this one way, very, very precise, versus another expectation, which is, hey, it's good enough, then two very, very, very different expectations, then we also take that in consideration when you build something. I think the only thing that we found over the past couple year and a half just doing this is when you build something for a business or they build it themselves, they kind of have to understand how to build it. And I think that's the one flaw in the make and Zapier system, is that the only group that can actually fix anything is us. So when this company wants to do this, and they're like, hey, I want you to scale this, it's like, we can do it, but because no one in the company really uses or sometimes use a tool, which is good for us. But at the same time too, there's just some things you're like, oh my God, if they can only do it themselves, it'd be so easy to just make that flip. But like, we have to do it. So I think that's an interesting piece. And there are some things that like we've built in the past that when GPTs came out, it was like, oh, we don't need to do that anymore. So I'm always curious to see what are some of the automations that have been built or these functions that may or may not get fixed with something else that comes down the road. I'm not sure. But if you're looking for up-to-date web search, it is true. Yes, you can use the Perplexity API, but man, it is slow. And at some points, I think we tried it with a connected respell to the Perplexity API. We just found their research agents way faster than running. It was more of a quick test to see what the accuracy of the results are. But it was like, even if the answer was accurate, it just took too long, and it would just throw off the client because they're like, that takes too long for whatever reason. So, but I think this goes to my point where the use is so personal, right? Like, so Brian, like the things that you're building, very, very focused on like, hey, this is how I want it. This is what it needs to do. And if it doesn't do this, I get frustrated, but I want it to do this. So I'm looking at this. I've heard that from so many people, but it's so focused onto what their needs are. So it's an interesting thing where I think it goes back to just organizational and enterprise use, where the adoption is there individual, because AI itself, I feel the more and more I see companies do it, it's very individualized. So you can't just drop some sort of, hey, here's a automation we used in one company, use that. And it would just be, there's like little differences that make all the difference in the world for that company. And I think this is an example of that. It's like a custom GPT could work for one, because that expectation and what they need it for, and it could be the exact same use case. This is the exact same output we want, while a more of an AI automation would work better because of what they, just the outlook and how they think through things. It's very, very fascinating what this industry is versus any other like SaaS tool.
We've talked about this too, like where Beth and I have definitely talked about this, setting expectations, whether you're us and you're building it for somebody else in a consultative way, right? A consultative way, whether you are the designated AI person at your company because you're the only one that talks about it and you've been, blessed as the AI person, whether you wanted to be that person or not. They're like, hey, we saw that one custom GPT you built. Can you build 5 more for us? That happens, right? We talk to people all the time. They're like, I mean, I'm kind of the AI guy or AI girl, but I didn't ask for it. I just sort of like, I guess I like it a little bit more than everybody else. And now they ask me questions about it, right? So there's all sorts of different ways you might fall into this. But setting expectations with AI is so different than anything else I've ever done because of the predictability of the consistency, I should say, not the predictability, the consistency of results. Take anything else that you've built in the past. If it was an Excel spreadsheet and you were a whiz at doing Excel formulas, concatenate or whatever, once you build it and you get rid of the first couple bugs or whatever, even though humans are somewhat unpredictable, more than likely that thing that you built is going to reproduce the same quality result over and over and over and over. It's a math problem. It's concatenate, it's left adjust, it's whatever it is. People have built some really amazing things in Excel, and they work. They work over and over and over again, unless there's some sort of weird bug or there's an update in Microsoft, right? And those things get fixed. But you don't really have to like educate the end user. You just have to explain usually once, this is how you use this feature, this function, this tool, and then it produces quality for you. With AI, when I build custom GPTs, Karl, I know you've talked about this too, sometimes it requires sitting down and going, hey, I can show you my screen. I can show you the results. I can do it 5 times. I can show you exactly the type of quality that you're going to get. We can all throw a parade and throw confetti in the air and go, this is amazing. And the reality is one of you might use this tomorrow and it may just fail. It might on your computer, and you're going to send me a screenshot and say, Brian, why does this do this? And I'm going to say, I've never seen it do that ever before, ever. And worse, I can't reproduce it on my side. Is it a prompting error? Maybe. There's always ways to make a prompt better, more efficient, lighter, faster. I mean, look, prompt engineering is a thing for a reason. Or is it because of who knows what? Because of whatever you're using ChatGPT on your side of it. And I've seen both. Sometimes we can fix it through prompting and better iterations and simpler ways, breaking things down into smaller bite-sized pieces. That usually works. Chain of thought thinking. There's a lot of tricks. But the reality is sometimes you have to say to the end user, I can only take you so far. And the reality is it may not be as good as your coworker sitting wherever, remotely or literally next door to you in a cubicle or office. There's a possibility you guys will get 2 different quality answers. And that is a tough pill to swallow, especially when you're producing, you're being paid to produce a result, right? Now I'm obviously talking about my experiences doing this. So, but to your point, Karl, what does the end user want? Speed? Do they want some variance in there? Or does it have to be the same pretty much every single time? Well, the reality is once you introduce a Perplexity or a ChatGPT or any of these, there's going to be variance in there because it's AI. So there's going to be some flexibility in there no matter what you do. But you're right, Karl. Are you okay? Is it the type of results you get? And it doesn't matter if it takes a minute because you're not doing it 1,000 times. You're going to go research this company once. Who cares if it takes 2 minutes? You're going to use that information now 13 different times. Or do you need something really fast because you've got a call in 3 minutes and you need a quality answer? That's probably not going to be the answer for you going to an API. You're going to be sitting on it.
I have a question for you, Brian. My experience is that even if there is variability in the response, and it's not perfectly consistent, generally the response is sufficient, meaning it's a good response. It's just qualitatively, or maybe not even some quantitative degrading of the quality of the answer, but it's generally really satisfying whatever comes out. And I wonder, the question to you is, can you think of some examples where it was just garbage and you got complaints from the clients because of the quality of the response?
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Because what ultimately happens, a lot of times the custom GPTs I build for clients, again, because we want a great user experience. If we build them internally, we build custom GPTs, I will very quickly bail and restart a custom GPT if I see it going off track just a little bit, because I don't care. I'm like, whatever, that's going down the wrong path, restart. And that usually sometimes will fix it, but you can't expect users to always know all the tricks of the trade, right? So what I have found in some cases is, despite it being very hand-holding, despite it saying, this is the next thing we're going to do together, sometimes, like the old Bugs Bunny cartoons, it takes a left turn at Albuquerque and it starts deviating from the structured path. And I have definitely seen results where clients have screenshotted or shared the actual thread with me. And I'm like, what is it doing? And I can see what they put in, and I can say, yeah, that's kind of exactly what I find, though, Andy, just to answer the question, is it usually happens at the very beginning. Like if it's task 1 or subtask 1 or whatever that trigger was, user will give you this and then you will do that, right? With that kind of thing. So like, what is the company you want to research? I input Nike, right? Or whatever. I find that if in that very first one, it feels a little off, bail and restart, and it typically will solve the problem. If you don't, it's like 2 lines that are almost parallel, but this one's a degree off. And so when you start, they're here, and when you finish, they're here, because they're a degree off, versus having them run in parallel. That's the best I can explain it. So yeah, I absolutely have. But that's because I'm trying to control a custom GPT that wants to be your buddy, your pal, and help you through the process yourself. And I'm saying, be rigid, which is really not its designed way sometimes, right? So I'm trying to force it to act a certain way, and not to put a personality on it, but ChatGPT is kind of sometimes 2 fingers in the air, 2 middle fingers in the air, and it's like, I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm going to try to help you this way. And that can deviate off the path that we necessarily need to get a structured answer. Because so many of the custom GPTs I build, the results of the previous subtask are dependent for the next task. The next task is dependent on the results of the previous. So you can see how quickly something can deviate off path. If the first answer is a little off, by the time you get to the 5th one and it's supposed to be building off of all previous results, it can be way off, way, way, way off. And then
thanks for that explanation, because it clarified in my mind that what you're talking about when you talk about these deviations is related to the sequence of instructions that you provided in your prompt. Because you wanted to follow a certain methodology. Right. And so that instruction-tuned LLM knows how to follow instructions, but it also has some variability in the way it will follow those instructions. And I've had that same experience. I've built some custom GPTs that, for an unknown user, it's supposed to go through this set of steps in a certain sequence. And I had no idea whether it did that reliably or not, because I've seen it go afield in my own interaction with it. So I get what you're talking about.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, don't forget too, here's the last thing I'll say, because Karl, I know you got it. The last thing I'll say is, don't forget too that if you're using a custom GPT that has sort of subtasks, like I give it to a client, I'm like, this is how you use it, and I train them and all that kind of stuff. What I always remind them is, let's say after task 2, like for instance, research this company, step 2 of that. Now, would you like me to look at what the trends are for a particular job title? Let's say I broke that up into 2 different tasks because I want ChatGPT to do independent search for each of those. It's better than if I combine the 2 and said, go look up this job title and also go look at the sub-industry. No. Those are two separate things. And I might want you to look at 6 different websites for each of them, right? So 2 different things. But what I was going to say is don't forget if the user, the end user says, hey, I have a quick follow-up question on that. That's correct. That's exactly how custom GPTs work. But in my mind, what you've done is say, oh, pause. Hey, ChatGPT, go be ChatGPT. And it can be tricky to get it to say, now go put your custom GPT hat back on and focus. Because sometimes it just wants to be ChatGPT. Same thing happens at the end of a sequence. It will continue as a typical ChatGPT interface. And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's not. Go ahead, Karl.
I would also say that a lot of the stuff, when you look at the instructions we're providing, I just don't think it has enough reasoning that it doesn't have enough, like even if you say think through it, it's not really thinking through it, right? So like, I'm curious to see if you can apply like O1 into it to see
nice.
what would that be? But the thing is though, would it be longer? So your latency suddenly goes up, your answers are more correct, but how would that impact your whole workflow too? So curious to see, as you know, GPT-5, GPT Next, O1, any of those things get applied to custom GPTs, what does that mean for, it'd be interesting because imagine like tomorrow be like, hey, we're allowing GPTs, you can choose which model. I'm sure you're going to go back and be like, okay, let's see how the new O1 model impacts my entire workflow, or I have to rebuild it because it takes too long, because each step now takes like an extra 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 5 minutes, whatever. So curious to, have you also, I don't know if you have if you use Claude, have you tried some of the things? Now I know Claude projects can't be shared, but I'm curious to see if some of the things that you've done can apply in Claude and maybe the reasoning is just a little bit better there. I'm not sure.
I love Claude. Can't access the internet.
Oh, okay, so it won't.
That you run into the exact same problem, right?
Yeah.
You run into the same issue is that that has been the big deal with it. And that's exactly why I want to have this show, because so many people are trying to build solutions where having real-time access to internet data, maybe up to the, maybe not the minute, but maybe you do want it to be able to pull in from a Twitter feed or something like that, is important for the use case. Also, though, very important to remember, sometimes like you're trying to build towards that because you think it'd be cool, but your actual use case doesn't matter whether there's real data from 6 months ago. In which case, hey, you don't need that. Don't build for that and get frustrated by what it's going to do to you. Go build it in Claude. You may find out that Claude is a much better solution for that. And this is where you get into using multi-tools and solutions as your AI sort of portfolio grows. You don't have to just play in one sandbox anymore, but it's really important to understand, well, but when? When do I leave my sandbox and go play in another one? When do I do that? And so, just getting back to like our show topic here with Perplexity API, it's not perfect. I will tell you right now, not only has Karl pointed out the speed problem of it, which is there's high latency, you will not find the same quality Perplexity search result as if you were using Perplexity at the website.
Yep.
You just won't. This is all over Reddit. In fact, if you want to have fun with it, go ask Perplexity what the problems are with its own API, and it will do a search result and tell you from Reddit what the problems are. And people will say, if I need up to the minute, almost like a stock ticker or a trade ticker, it's not great at that, not in the API. It just simply isn't. So if that's your use case, probably not the right tool for it. However, where you can see advantages are, number one, if you don't mind if it takes a little bit longer to run, if you want to break down each piece independently and have more control over things like the like creativity, your temperature. But what you're going to lose is that automation, unless you put stops in it, is going to run through. So if it has an issue at step 2 in make, and you see your result, you go, oh, that's not right. But you just spent a minute and a half getting a wrong answer. ChatGPT, in a custom GPT, you're not going to necessarily run into that. You can course correct immediately after certain steps in there. You can build that into automations, but it's a different way of going about it. And sometimes people want to be part of the process, and sometimes they want a magic potion. And they want to say, I want this to work immediately every single time, and do not ask me as the end user, whether I'm okay with what you've done so far. Back to what you said, Karl, it really depends on end user. What do you want this tool to do, and what are you willing to sacrifice? Because there will absolutely be sacrifices to get the type of results you want. And that ultimately, if you're providing a solution or building it for yourself, is going to help you decide, where should I be looking for this solution? Is it Claude? Is it an API? Is it the assistant, the agent? Is it just a simple custom GPT because it'll get the job done quickly and I can probably build it and deploy it in the next 30 minutes? Right? What else? Anything? Any other thoughts on that?
I think that's a good wrap up of how, you know, you can approach it in like whatever your business use case is. You know, you identify how complex something is. If you're looking for early ideation, you know, an MVP, custom GPT seems to be the answer.
Yeah.
The more complex your end result's going to be, or the more sophisticated you want the experience to be, that's been identified. And you know, finally, if you need to be platform agnostic, you're going to lean towards the API side as opposed to a custom GPT. I think that wraps it up. Yeah.
Nice. Anything, Andy? Were you about to say anything or no? Nope. Good. Okay. Well, listen, we'll leave it there. Look, hopefully this was helpful to you. If nothing else, hopefully when you're thinking about this and you're thinking about solutions, I agree. Probably to test out an idea, an MVP, custom GPTs. I would start there because it's going to be so blazingly fast to test out different ideas and prompting. You could always break it out into the API and test it on that side too. I do agree though, a custom GPT is super quick. By the way, if you don't need search, also same thing in Claude. So just not to say it's one tool over another. It just really depends what you need to get out of the other end of it. So hopefully this is really helpful. Hopefully this helps you out if you're building yourself. Tools like Make are fairly easy, although I will tell you, like as Karl kind of said, you got to drill down into 16 different drill downs to get to where the answer is. It's not visually super easy to see where the answers are and stuff. So you do have to have a little bit of know-how. Same thing with Zapier. They have their own little ways of doing things. So, you know, if you do play in those spaces, you do have to have a little bit of know-how, and it's not super easy to just hand off to somebody else and say, oh, it's easy, go fix the prompt. You're going to run into issues with that. Okay, that's it today. Happy to be back after I know I didn't mention at the top of the show, but Hurricane Milton. I hope anybody else in that path in Florida is safe and well. It was a very late night last night, very high winds in my house, but the house is fine, no flooding, no issues. But can't say the same for everybody else around the state. So if you're affected by Milton, I hope you're doing well and your family is safe. We will be back tomorrow, but truthfully, somebody help me out. What are we back? Notebook LM. I see it here on my screen. It tells you I've been out this week. Notebook LM. So lots of use cases. Notebook LM. It's been in the news, the AI news a lot. And as Beth was saying, there's even more that it can do. So we're going to get into that tomorrow and learn about another tool and kind of deep dive into it. So thanks for all the comments. Love it. Sign up Perplexity Pro. People talking about it. Challenging. Jude says challenge accepted. So lots going on in the comments as well. Thanks everybody. We will see you again tomorrow. If you want to learn about all the cool things you can do with Google's Notebook LM, make sure you come back tomorrow and hang out with us. Until then, have a great day, and we will see you. Bye.
Aloha.